Just a bit of introduction to us and sort of our vision. Tom and I, Tom's also on the call, we'll do some introductions in a moment. We founded and own My Practice Manager and also AI for General Practice UK Facebook group. And the vision here is My Practice Manager is a tool to help practice managers and practice partners save time, particularly around compliance for things like health and safety, infection control, and ultimately CQC. And AI for General Practice UK Facebook group is fast becoming the one-stop shop for anything AI within general practice. So if you want to chat through a new product you're thinking of trialing or launching in your practice, it's sort of open for discussion there. If you want to get some honest feedback or sense check something with us or one of our peers in the group, that is the place to come. So we'll share the link with you later and a bit of an ask as a result of this to sort of share that far and wide if you can. So a little bit about us. I'm Jermaine. I'm a partner in a practice in Manchester. Got 3 sites, look after just short of 20,000 patients, and also part-time on My Practice Manager and this AI group. Tom, big welcome to Tom. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Tom. I work on My Practice Manager as well as the CTO. So I've got about 20 years experience of technology. I've worked for investment banks, large tech companies, and now, Jermaine and I met each other through the school of one of our children, and we got chatting, and we realised that there's lots of opportunity to do cool things with AI and with technology inside of general practice and to make it better. So that's what we've kind of trying to do here, trying to help a bit.
Great, thanks. And today is very much geared towards practice managers and how you can sort of do the important stuff that we always put on the back burner quicker, more efficiently, and perhaps with some better background and some better sort of compliance in there. And just setting the scene, really, I don't know about anybody else, but my January as a sort of managing partner or a practice manager in a practice has been pretty hectic. We have 56 staff across our 3 sites, and 12 of those are off at the moment, either with long-term sickness, short-term sickness, such as flu, or holidays. And it's really compounded the issue that I've got lots of things that I plan to do in January, mainly sort out the cough and get those sort of last 3 months pushed through, and a few risk assessments that I would have I've liked to have written. And just getting that headspace to do that is hard when you've got your reception manager coming to you saying that they're short-staffed and can we help out, or can we get a temp in, and then you have to sort of unpick that with them and make sure they are aware of the steps that they need to take. For example, getting a temp in isn't quite as easy as just putting a bum on a seat. It involves training, which they're going to have to do. And those kind of things, really. And it's only, my reflection is with 2 young children as well, it's only really sort of about 7 o'clock at night that I start to think about the stuff that I should be doing as a practice manager. And I really hope the takeaway message from today is that you can use AI and predominantly ChatGPT or some tools that we'll share with you today to really get the stuff done as a practice manager that you need to, so you can spend more time on that operational stuff. Because doing the operational stuff, when we do it right and we empower our team, it makes us feel good. But also going to bed at night and knowing that we've done everything we need to do in terms of compliance if the CQC were to come tomorrow is the most important thing, which we often neglect. The other thing that we'll try and help you take away today is some of the pitfalls of AI and cautions that we need to take. So things like data privacy and concerns around GDPR and how we get around those. And also we'll just show you a few little things that perhaps one of the things we never often, or we often neglect, is sort of the power of information, and sort of looking at the 32-page GMS contract highlights document that comes out in April, and how we can, instead of taking that home to never read at night, how we can use AI to give us things like an executive summary and sort of be on the ball. So at this point in a minute, I'm just going to hand over to Tom, but just we're going to have a look at ChatGPT. Tom's going to do a little explain and a presentation on what ChatGPT is, but also some of the considerations around AI and how we need to be cautious around data. And then once we've got all that sort of stuff out of the way, then we'll start the nice stuff and look at some real life examples and how it can help us in our day-to-day job.
So I don't have a slide explaining ChatGPT, but let me just cover that out first. So ChatGPT is a AI for that answers questions, and it answers questions by generating some text. So it's a text generation machine. So you put some text in, and it tries to generate some answer to that. It doesn't know, it doesn't think, and we'll get onto some of the implications of that in a moment. But just the first thing to know is that it's a text generation machine, and then we'll go through some of the kind of implications of that. So there are significant potential pitfalls when using AI, and I really don't want to scare you. I just want you to know the very basics, and then I don't know, join the Facebook channel or email us directly and ask us those questions, and we're friendly and we'll answer, even if it's nothing to do with our business, or at least we'll try to. So first thing to know is that data travels worldwide when you use a service. So let's say you're using ChatGPT. The servers for that, I think they're all in the middle of the US. So the big server farms in the middle of the US. You're using ChatGPT. Everything you type will get sent over to the US. A response will be generated on a computer in a big server farm, and then that response will be packaged back up and sent back to you. Other services will have data centers in the UK, Europe, possibly Asia. That's not that common, but maybe it's fairly common to have them in China or even some in Russia. And so you just need to be aware of that. And there are different laws and different rules around where data can pass, and the more sensitive the data, so anything that identifies someone personally or anything that identifies someone's medical history, that really needs to be kept within a jurisdiction that has the same set of laws as us and the same set of restrictions as us. And ideally that stays within the UK. So for example, our own system puts all of the servers and all of the data in the UK, just so that it's easier to rationalise that data is not going to another place. The next thing to think about is how is AI generating that answer, and the best way I can describe it is that it's guessing. So what it tries to do is guess the next best word when you input a question. And this is important because you might ask it, are you sure? Or, oh, can you just check that that's the right answer? And you might think that you're talking to some entity that can sort of form concepts in the brain, validate those concepts through a collection of rational steps. And that's not what the AI is doing. It appears super bright and it's got lots of information, but it really is just a completion device, a sentence completion device. One place where that's really relevant in medicine would be if there's a standard way of doing things, it might default to that standard way. So say you were asking it to write prescriptions for you, and there's a standard dosage of those prescriptions, and for some reason you want to give half a dose or twice as much. The AI might think that that's a mistake, because not think, but it might generate the standard rather than those two extremes, because it's designed to kind of pick statistically the most likely answer rather than necessarily the one that you inputted as the right idea. Finally, it's worth just poking into the terms and conditions of all of the services that you use. Jermaine's just gone through how you can reduce your workload by using AI, and I'm saying that you need to go and read these incredibly dry, boring documents on terms and conditions. I'd say it was fairly safe, honestly, to use AI to read terms and conditions. They're actually quite good at that. But again, you need to dig in to really understand where your data's going, how is it being used, is it safe, is it encrypted, what kind of security does it have around it. So what would I suggest? Well, I'd start with something low risk, and that's basically what we're going to do today. Operational, non-privacy data, super low risk. The worst case is that you generate a risk assessment that's nonsense, and you're all professionals. You should all be able to read that and realize that it's silly, and then just not use it. You need to have some idea of where your data is going and how it's going to be used. Is it going to be used for training? You should scan or ideally read the terms and conditions of the things that you're using. And then you should, and this is for future more than now, you should really understand and risk assess the impact of errors. You know, if you generate a risk assessment and it's nonsense, and you read it and you realize it's nonsense, that's fine. If you do a automated prescription or document coding, for example, and that misses the coding of, I don't know, a cancer diagnosis, well, that's quite a significant error, and you should expect those errors. They will definitely happen throughout the whole usage of AI. It's very much like hiring a human. Humans generate errors too. So you should just understand that there will be errors, and then work out what the significance of those are and what safeguards you want to put in place when using that. So yeah, I'll hand over back to Jermaine.
The visions for AI for general practice is, after this seminar on practice management and ChatGPT, we are going to launch some more around things like reviews of companies that file lab results for us, and what sort of case studies do we have around that. And we'll have things like panel discussions of people who are using it already, and we'll bring in some data experts who can tell us some of the pitfalls or some of the issues that practices face, or some of the considerations that you might want to do before you utilise these sort of things. So that's the future thing. So stay tuned to our channel for those webinars to come up in time. And again, we're just talking as we talked today, very light touch, operational matters and compliance matters as a practice manager. So some of the things that I use AI or predominantly ChatGPT for on a daily basis is, instead of, we'll all be familiar with this issue that we sometimes walk into a day off. I have a Thursday off for doing other things, like today with my practice manager, and sometimes on a Friday I can walk into sort of around 150 emails that have accumulated from today, and within those 150 there is undoubtedly 3 or 4 emails that require me to sit down and have some thinking time, and perhaps it may be a change in a piece of legislation, or it might be an update from the ICB. And in our head we have the action steps that we need to take quite nicely. We might even read it the night before we come into work to try and catch up, and so we've got a plan in our heads of what we need to do for that day. But often that plan doesn't come to fruition because we walk in and then we get dragged into operational matters. So I've started to really utilise ChatGPT for having a clear email inbox, and ensuring that if I see an email that needs an action, instead of parking that for later, I'll just fire it off to ChatGPT and say, this is the change in the legislation, this is what my policy or procedure currently says, can you make me a new SOP and suggest how I should cascade that amongst my staff? Or it might be, this change of legislation has come in, this is our current situation, can you generate me a risk assessment based on this guidance, please? And then it's done, it's out of the way, and that email's been actioned. Responding to complaints. So one of the things we'll say about with our product, My Practice Manager, later on, because we have a free trial on it at the moment, so it won't cost you anything to use, is we've done things like we've pointed our AI technology to look at the latest guidance. So for example, if it's complaints, that would be the latest guidance from MPS or MDU and the RCGP toolkit on complaint responses. But you could certainly start by using ChatGPT for responding to complaints, as long as you didn't put any patient data in there and it was very anonymized. They can give you some very good pointers to look at, or sort of good phrases to respond to patients, which we can come on to later. Maximising SEAs, or patient learning events as they're now called, and risk assessments. And this is a huge one for the CQC. So traditionally, those of us that have been in general practice for a long time will know that the CQC were very keen on making sure we had a full suite of policies and procedures And then they moved on to something like, can you now prove that that's what your team are doing now? And they're more focused now on things like risk assessment and are you learning from your policies? Are your policies being adapted based on adverse events or little incidents that you've had? And one of the ways that we can demonstrate that they're obsessed with is having lots and lots and lots of risk assessments. And they can be very time consuming to write. They can take a good 2-3 hours of your day up to sit down and think about what went wrong, what could go wrong, and what you could do to minimize those events. And ChatGPT, really can, if you give it the specific advice, which is what we'll look at in a bit, can really generate extremely good risk assessments within 5 to 10 minutes that you can then cascade to your staff and put into your health and safety folder and things like that. And then again, the other way as well, reading your risk assessments and generating an output plan. So you might have a risk assessment for latest guidance. We know most of the country was affected by heavy snow last week, and some of our health and safety providers wrote to us and said you should be thinking about this in terms of your staff car parks, your patient walkway areas and things like that. And in ChatGPT or any form of AI that, such as my practice manager, is very good for inputting that information and saying, this is what we do in our practice. Do you think you could make me a little plan for my staff? And do you think you could give me some very specific advice to output to my deputy, rather than sitting with your deputy and doing some sort of a chat with them and saying, this is what I'd like you to do. This is very much specific. I want you to do this, and can you let me know when it's done? And again, compelling emails to staff. We see this on the practice managers Facebook group all the time. People asking us, people asking each other in their peers, has anybody got a nicely written email to staff around things like worries about pay and redundancies and strike action, or has anybody got any examples of when they've written to the ICP requesting help for funding for estates, or to reach out to the ICP and say that we're struggling? ChatGPT is very, very powerful at helping you write compelling emails because you can set tones and language styles and things like that. One of the other things I use it for is social media posts. So I don't know if anybody has been in a similar situation to me, but I've had instances where I've delegated social media to staff, and they've often wrote things or sent texts to patients, such as the practice is closed, and it was written or it was formed in a way that sort of made patients panic a little bit, and then had an influx of calls or complaints that you put on Facebook yesterday, or you text us all yesterday to say that the practice was closed for 3 hours when I had an appointment, therefore I didn't turn up, and things like that. So ChatGPT is very powerful at writing very specific social media posts for groups of patients or staff, and you can make it very specific to say it's for a group of people with a reading age of such a level, and it's very powerful for them. Okay, so there's a screenshot from my ChatGPT. So that's just an example of some of the things that I've used it for, and again we'll go on to some real case studies in a moment, but you can see on the left hand side there I've done some fun things like games for our Christmas team gathering just before Christmas. You can see I've asked it to create me an audit toolkit for in November when there was the Gloves Off Awareness Week for infection control. You'll see I've used it for a framework for our ANP in terms of career progression, so targets that we'd expect our ANP who's recently qualified, and how we can then turn that into an audit sort of toolkit to make sure they're hitting their targets and competencies, and some fun personal things as well. So right at the bottom left you'll see just before Christmas I went to Prague for the weekend, and I asked it to make me an itinerary, and it was absolutely perfect. Okay, so some of the things that would be helpful to consider when using ChatGPT, just before we go into a sort of live demo, is we often hear in the NHS people are obsessed with PDSA or Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles, and I would exactly adopt this model when you're using ChatGPT. So the first time you use it, or if you read the output and you're not sure, keep going, keep changing little bits, and it will learn you. It will learn how you sort of like to have your output, and that will correct things in future. So be as clear and specific with your request as you can. So instead of saying things like draft a patient letter, write a letter to a patient who is vulnerable or elderly or young, and those kind of things. set the tone that you want, formal, straight to the point, make it more concise, things like that. Yeah, keep asking follow-up questions. The other thing that is you can do is you can point it to guidance first, which is always very helpful. So before you ask it to make you a policy on the recall of patients for type 2 diabetes, point it to the latest NICE guidance first and some useful websites that you've read that you think I'd really love to do that in my practice. Share the links with it and then ask it the question that you want to ask it. You can then sort of, once it starts to learn sort of, if you shared 5 links with it of stuff that you've read or you like, or the latest NICE guidance, and then you can ask it to start outputting some training materials or educational handouts for your staff. You can do that again for things like policies and procedures. You could share the 10 policies and procedures that you know the CQC are going to focus on when they do their target or focused visit, and you could ask it to read them and then output you a handbook for your staff and some training questions. So yeah, we've looked at them. We'll share these slides after with you. In there, I've got 10 for you to try, which would be very useful to start off with and get used to this sort of thing. And just harnessing what Tom said earlier about AI and just the stuff that we've looked at recently, I just wanted to maybe put some golden rules down that we'll start at the bottom. I think that's the most important one. There's always a balance that you need to strike when it comes to time versus quality. So don't always take the first answer. Whilst the first answer is generated probably within less than a minute, we're looking at saving 2 to 3 hours of our time. So an exchange of 10 minutes is a lot better than the first answer it gives within a minute. Spend time to generate that quality, because it will still be significantly less than something we could think of or do ourselves. Keep a list of successful prompts you've used before. So if something really worked before, make a note of that so that you can use that again, and that will help form how you use it in the future. And please do make sure you never input patient names, NHS numbers, etc. Anything that you can identify a patient or a staff member with. I've made mistakes before, which I've got one to show you. I inputted a risk assessment for a pregnant member of our staff who filled out a long form, and I inputted that into ChatGPT and asked it to give me an output with her answers on what I should be doing in terms of adaptations for her. And I did include her name in error, which again I shared with her and I told her what happened, but it was just a name and there's nothing else to identify her. So it's just things like that to think about. So here's one real life example. On the Facebook group for practice managers around sort of late November, we had a lot of talk around the NI hike and how this was going to affect staff. And there was strike action going on at the time. And I know a lot of us were sort of worried about our staff welfare and how they sort of thought sort of about job security. And so I know this affected my staff. And so I asked them, I asked ChatGPT to write me an email to staff to sort of reassure them that everything would be fine and that we hope that the government will change its stance. People were particularly worried about redundancies, and so we wanted to try and get an email to them saying, don't worry about that. That is our very, 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 very last case scenario. And you can see my first question on the left-hand side, I wanted to make sure that the ChatGPT knew that I loved my colleagues in general practice. So this is a very sort of empathetic, compassionate letter that I wanted to send to them. And it's interesting because if you see their response, it worded it towards the end that actually, I want to be transparent with you all. If there's no change or relief granted, we may be faced with extremely tough choices, such as redundancies. And I really didn't want that email to go out. So that's something that you need to check. And you can see on the right-hand side, I said, I really like this letter, this is great, but can you rewrite it so that redundancies aren't in there and actually provide a lot of reassurance that things should be okay. and it did, and the second time around it outputted a perfect sort of response, which is then we shared. And it's really interesting actually, because I shared this on the Facebook group post where somebody who's really struggling with their staff, and I shared this letter, and it received over 150 likes because I think a lot of people used it and thanked us for it. So it's just some real examples of how it can really work, and it can be really effective. Because things like this, for example, the practice managers that I spoke to that asked for help with this, they were struggling with motivation themselves, because I think they had a tough day with the staff. And when you're struggling with motivation, to find the motivation to write a nice email like this can be quite hard and tricky. So it really empowered them as well, so it can empower you. So I just thought I'd show you a quick walk through ChatGPT, if that's useful. So you can see my examples on the left-hand side, which is what I shared with you earlier. But I can go through some examples here. So we had some snow and ice last week. It was particularly bad where we are based, over sort of the south side of Manchester. And I started by saying, there's severe snow and ice in our area. What should I be doing for my staff and patients? And it came up with a little plan. And the plan was great. It's stuff that perhaps I hadn't thought of. It picked up things that perhaps I should be thinking of, but I hadn't. So it was useful. But on reading it, it wasn't really what I was hoping for. I was hoping for sort of a direct sort of comms package for me to send out to staff and patients to make sure that they're keeping well in this time, but also to reassure them that we're here for them. And so I told you back, that PDSA cycle was, this is great, but I was hoping for more sort of like comms to send to staff, and maybe have like a social media message for patients on how to stay well. And it produced exactly this. And, some of us with sort of trendy colleagues, or whatever you want to call them, younger colleagues, put some emoticons in there, which I know that our younger staff absolutely love, because every time I send an email, it includes one. And, it's just great. It was straight to the point, catchy, exactly what we needed it for today. Perfect. And again, same for social media. It did exactly what we needed it to do. The interesting thing was, I checked the social media post before I posted it on our practices Meta, Facebook and Insta. And I actually read it, and I was worried that it sort of came across to the patient that we were closed to call 111 instead. So I just said to it, you can see down here, this is great, but I worry that it makes us sound closed. Can you rewrite it to sort of let people know that we're here and to help them? And it did. It said, we're here for you. You can call the surgery as normal. Just take care if you are coming down for an appointment, sort of thing. And that's exactly what we wanted. And so once I had a thought about that, and I posted that and I sent an email to the staff, I then sort of said, can you now go on and create me a risk assessment, because some of the paths outside the practice where patients and staff will be walking are very snowy. And it did exactly that for me. And that whole thing took 10 minutes. So perfect. Again, sort of late November, early December, you can see that there was the gloves off campaign for sort of reduction of use of PPE, but also entering winter, effective hand hygiene to sort of prevent the spread of winter viruses. So I started off by asking for an audit toolkit from the staff in my practice as part of the campaign. So it went away and read the National Gloves Off campaign and came up with this. And you can see that the first thing that it came up with was very much a policy. I mean, that's the policy. The policy says, this is what you should be doing in your practice. This is what you should be saying to your staff. And this is what you should be doing in terms of a risk assessment or an action plan with your staff. And again, I said to it, look, that's great, but I actually want you to write the audit for me. I want you to do the doing. I've already had that headspace. I've already thought about that plan in my head. I actually want you to write me the audit. So I told it that's what I wanted it to do, and it came up with exactly that. And again, this was perfect, because then I could export that into a Word document, and I handed that to my lead nurse, and I said, can you go around and do this audit for me? And that's something I can put inside my infection control folder. The CQC love it, and I've done that work within 10 minutes. Delete the email, done. I'm trying to think of anything else that would be useful to show you. I guess at this point, I just wanted to sort of ask, feel free to put hands up or shout out. Is there anything that anybody would like a live demo on? Has anybody got anything they'd want sort of to run through with us now? Anything that someone's been struggling with that perhaps we could try and help you with? Okay, fine. I will just show you my practice manager then. So you'll notice that some of the stuff that we looked at in ChatGPT involved sort of reiterating outputs to get the output that we wanted. And it also involved perhaps pointing people to the latest guidance, pointing it to the latest guidance from things like MDU or RCGP on how you should respond to complaints, or how the latest guidance for the management of type 2 diabetes or asthmatic patients. I just wanted to share with you our product, My Practice Manager. We've taken some stuff here, and there's other stuff as well, so that we'll share the demo link with you later, but we've got management tools, so things like a social media post creator, business plan writer, and the staff email writer. But compliance tools specifically today, we have policy writers and SOP creators, and they have been pointed towards the latest guidance for things. Similarly for risk assessments and significant events. So the significant events, the SEA writer takes into account the RCGP SEA toolkit. Similarly for risk assessments. So I'll just show you one of these. So you can use this. You can create a title, put in exactly what you want for a risk assessment to be done, and it could be as brief as you want it to see what the output's like, or you could really write something specific and keep going, and it produces result down there. And you can for now download that to PDF, which you can then share with your staff by email. Similarly as well for all of these things. Okay, so we'll share that link with you if that's helpful after the meeting. And again, some of the ways that we'd really like you to help us is we'd like you to tell as many colleagues as possible to join our Facebook group, so you can start using this for advice. If you come across, you have in your PCN, if anybody says, oh, I'm thinking of putting in prescription signing in my practice, you can come to this group for advice and just discuss other peers who may be using it. So please ask as many people to join as possible. And I can see that some of you who are in this group now are joining it. So that's really nice. Thank you. And I'll approve your membership after this meeting. And again, please tell as many people as possible to use our free demo on My Practice Manager for Jan and Feb. I know it's December, but this is the repeat seminar. We had quite a few people in December doing this with us. And please feel free to use it, because we're going to help optimize your AI journey as a PM as much as possible.
Thank you for joining us for today's AI seminar, sponsored by My Practice Manager. My Practice Manager helps GP practices stay compliant, organised and profitable, with tools exclusively designed for practice managers. To learn more about how we can support your practice, visit us online at mypracticemanager.co.uk. We're excited to connect with you all, so please do keep in touch.